This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News. And of course, I got some news to counterpunch for you today. I did a video Saturday night right after the destruction of Dominique Wade by Gennady Golovkin. And, I got some decent reviews and remarks about that particular fight. And I just want to reiterate that when Golovkin, I believe that Golovkin's trying to stay at 160 because that's where he's trying to build his legacy because he's a 160-pound fighter. Now, there are really no fights that on the elite level that can be made. I mean, a lot could be made, but it's the reluctancy of the fighters. The fighters are reluctant to get in the ring with him at 160. So he's going to always have problems with elite fighters at 160 pounds. However, there are a lot of fights that can be made outside of the 160-pound bracket. Lara's been calling him out. If you're fighting guys like Dominique Wade and knocking out mandatories and Willie Monroe Jr., there's nothing wrong with stepping up in class and fighting an elite fighter. Doesn't matter the weight class, because if you wanted to come down for Floyd Mayweather for 154, why not fight the champion at 154, which is Erislandy Lara? You know what I mean? So that fight could be made. And Lara is the one that has been calling his name out. So, that would, if I'm Golovkin in the Golovkin's camp, that would be a fight easier for me because that's a fight that I don't have to chase down. I don't have to worry about a guy telling me to come down. If I have a fighter screaming at me saying, "Hey, I would love to fight you at 160 pounds," and oh, by the way, I am the 154-pound champion. I've also headlined a pay-per-view with Canelo Alvarez, the guy that you're trying to fight, and I've technically never lost a fight. So, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's one of those situations where Golovkin's running out of fighters. You know what I'm saying? Because if he never gets the Saunders fights, the Quillen fights, the Jacob fights, never gets to fight with Canelo, I mean, something else has got to pan out. You know what I'm saying? Because there won't be any other fights that he can make unless he moves up or down. If he wants to hold on to the objective of keeping or obtaining all the belts at 160, and all these fighters are keeping him for ransom, who else is he going to fight? He's going to be there forever fighting the same opposition. And people are still going to criticize him for that. You know what I mean? And I understand that in that weight class only, there is a standstill on fights because the fighters don't want to fight Golovkin. He's feared, He's an indestructible force at the 160-pound division. He is the monster at 160 right now. You know what I mean? And he's going after the belt. So if all those guys, they want to avoid GGG, just give up the belts, because that's eventually it's going to happen. But, you can waste your time trying to fight those guys, or you can, make a little money here on the side or go up and down and make a name for yourself, by fighting Lara. He has nothing. The thing is about fighting Lara, if he beats Lara, that will shut Lara up, because Lara is one of those guys where, yes, he has a lot to say. He calls out a lot of people, but it's like, call his bluff, You have to. Lara is a guy that you have to shut up physically. So if he can physically beat Lara and it's an easy fight, like he says, take the fight. You know what I mean? And he doesn't have to run again. I don't see any run-ins with K2 Promotions and Al Heyman. You know what I'm saying? So they don't have beef or they don't have a lawsuit going on at the time. So, unlike Golden Boy or Top Rank, So, again, that fight could easily be made. And I would like to see it because, unlike Lara, or unlike Willie Monroe Jr. rather, Lara has timing speed, and he has good footwork. and he is a superb boxer. You know, then he is a name. You know, for the reasons that Golovkin's camp states they don't want to fight him, is just totally contradictive, 100%. You know, they can mention that they don't want to fight Lara because he's a smaller fighter, but Gabe Rosado did the same thing. Gabe Rosado came from 154 to 160 to fight Golovkin. You know, that's why he wanted to fight Golovkin right there. You know, I mean, he wanted to fight him, and he's a 154-pound fighter. So, of course, he moved up to middleweight, but, you know, Gabe Rosado, not taking anything away from Gabe, you know, he's not on the pedigree as a fighter named Miroslav Lara, you know. And if their excuse comes, well, he's been beaten. Well, I mean, so is Gabe Rosado, but you fought him. You know, had no problems making that fight. So why would you have a problem making the Miroslav Lara fight? You know, so I just find that real odd and real strange, you know, that if no one wants to fight you, you would take the next best thing. And Lara is the next best thing. You know, if you can't get a Canelo fight, you would fight the guy that a lot of people think beat Canelo, right? You know, I mean, think about that. I mean, that's just simple logic. You think about what Floyd Mayweather did when he came back into the sport of boxing, you know, when he reintroduced himself in the sport of boxing, and, you know, after he knocked out Ricky Hatton, he came back to the sport, and he didn't fight Pacquiao. Who did he fight? He fought Marquez, the guy that gave Pacquiao the most trouble. So you see the similarities? So that fight can easily be made, and I don't see why that fight hasn't been made. You know, the only thing that I can come up with speculation, maybe, just maybe, a fight like that is purposely not got made simply because Lara is not the tailor-made fighter that they stick in front of Golovkin. You know, because he, you know, I mean, a lot of people has accused Golovkin's camp of picking these type fighters. They call them tomato cans. I wouldn't call them tomato cans per se, but I would call them fighters that were designed for Golovkin's style, if that makes sense. You know, and if you really go in depth and you think more about it, why do you think Golovkin wants to fight Canelo so bad? You know what I'm saying? Like, think about it. I mean, yes, he says, oh, because he has the belt. Okay. Well, I hope that's the reason. But if you really think about it, why is he so hard up to what other reason would it be for him to fight Canelo? Would it be the money? I mean, Golovkin's doing okay right now. He's made $2 million his last fight. So what other reason, you know, to fight Canelo? Well, I'll give you one. Canelo's a flat-footed fighter, right? You know, so you would want to fight someone that is tailor-made like the fighters you have been fighting. You know, and of course, there's no big secret. Canelo has been exposed in a few fights. You know, Mayweather, Lara, to name a few. You know, and he was exposed to a way, oh, he's flat-footed. You know, and they give him nicknames like cement in his feet and stuff like that. And, you know, he can't cut off the ring for shit. You know, he showed that in the Lara fight because, you know, with Canelo's punch variety, he should have beat Lara into the ground with those body punches that he was throwing. You know, the face punches. I mean, you have to like T Street Controversy says, you have to fight. You have to land more than 9 jabs in a fight. You know what I'm saying? And that's what Canelo landed, and there's Landy Lara, and it was just ridiculous. You know, I mean, it was like 107 and 97. You know, so, you know, but still, Golovkin, I feel, back to him, I feel that he wants to fight a fighter that, if that's true, you know, if a lot of these fighters are being tailor-made for Golovkin's style, Canelo fits right in line for that, because he has the same style as, you know, he comes right towards you. You know, he has some good counter-punching skills, but he comes right towards you. So he's tailor-made for Golovkin. So a guy that would not be tailor made for Golovkin would be Erislandy Lara, because he's not going to stand there and follow and attack you in a straight line. You know what I mean? He's going to use he's going to use side steps, lateral movement, defense by moving. Sure, he's going to move a lot, but that's smart against Golovkin. You don't want to exchange with Golovkin. If you exchange with him, he'll beat your brains out. But if you box him, you would make Golovkin box you more than anything else. So, I just think of that type of fight being made. You would learn a lot about Golovkin. You could learn a lot about Golovkin, and you would learn about the will of Lara also if the fight could ever be made. But fights like that should be made, because if 160 pounds for the last 3 to 4 years have given you trouble, and these guys have been avoiding you for that long of time, what makes you think in the next 2 or 3 years they're going to do anything different? You know what I'm saying? So, if I was Golovkin's camp, do a little critiquing on it on his end. He should either go up, fight Andre Ward at a catchweight, or DeGale, or a lot of fighters, or Froch. You know what I mean? That fight was on the table once upon a time. By the way, he is retired, but so is Mayweather. So I mean, he would come down to fight Mayweather at 154 pounds, like he stated. Or he could just, or take the easiest way. Let Lara come to you, which is easier. If someone wanted to beat my ass, it would be easier for them to come right here, not for me to go and venture out to find them. You know what I'm saying? So, I think about that type fight happening. It could be marketed very well. The numbers would be through the roof. And if Golovkin would run through Lara like he did all of his other opponents, there's no way in hell that Canelo Alvarez would fight him then. No way. But Golovkin could put up a hell of an argument stating, well, hey, I beat the guy that gave you the most problems besides Mayweather. I knocked him out with ease. Sure, styles make fights, but Golovkin showed that he was able to dispatch a difficult fighter that no one looks good against by knockout, and no one ever knocked Lara out, as opposed, let alone beat him or barely beat him. You know what I'm saying? So that would be a big statement on the Golovkin camp, and that would put Golovkin farther and farther up there on the pound for pound list, because for one, he's beat a legitimate guy in the world on the pound for pound list, my pound for pound list. You know what I'm saying? And it would be a fight that could be marketable and very exciting. Of course, he will be the aggressor. Will he be the effective aggressor? Will Lara be able to touch him and move, and touch him and move like he's done, in previous fights? It would be an exciting fight, and I see there's no reason for that fight not to get made. I see no reason for it. None whatsoever. So, that's just going in depth with the whole Canelo, Golovkin, Lara thing, because if Golovkin really wants to be great, he has to step outside his comfort zone. But when I say that, I don't mean him going to 155 to fight Canelo. No, I wouldn't do that either. And I'm with Golovkin on that. I would do it for Mayweather, because everyone knows that Mayweather is a smaller fighter. Mayweather has never came in at 154 pounds. I think the highest Mayweather has came in at is like 152 or something like that. I think when he fought Miguel Cotto, he weighed in at 152. So he's not that much bigger than that. He's never weighed in that at solid 154 pounds. So I can understand him coming down, and plus that's the multi-million-dollar fight. He would probably get $7 or $8 million to fight Floyd, win, lose, or draw. So I can understand him doing that, and I can also understand him not going down to fight Canelo Alvarez. So Canelo's there's a reason why you have Canelo weight, because he couldn't make the 154-pound junior middleweight limit anyway. He couldn't make the weight anymore. That's why he done that. And you can still see when he weighs in, and I see him, praying, and I see him, because he's worried if he can make that weight still, and I wonder, like, okay, it's some nervousness. He looks starched. I know a lot of people, they limit themselves from different carbohydrates to make weight, but Canelo looks like he has AIDS. You know what I'm saying? So he definitely needs to just man up and move the middleweight. But I know there's fear in that camp of fighting Golovkin because of the styles again. But no, Golovkin should fight Lara. If Lara's calling Golovkin out and nobody else wants to fight Lara, make the fucking fight happen. That's just common sense. But that's a little critiquing and counterpunching on my end. But again, this is Kurt DeVille. Please subscribe to Fresh One Media. And you've been counterpunched. Peace.